Okay, I hope you can hear me. So, hello.
Fine.
Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, or good night. I'm sorry, I would have been very happy to welcome all of you in France this week, but it was not possible for the reasons we all know. However, I'm very happy to join this virtual meeting. So thank you for inviting me, and happy birthday to Gottfried. Well, Christian invited me after we met last year on the occasion of Laussedat's bicentenary, when I organized a workshop in Paris and the publication of a collective book. The workshop and the book were in French, but fortunately, our president speaks French fluently, and he joined us to recall that Laussedat's legacy is in fact international. We also received written contributions from Canada about the ville, from Austria about Dolejal, and an important contribution from Germany about Meidenbauer by Albrecht Grimm, because it would not be reasonable to speak of Laussedat's role in the emergence of modern photogrammetry without considering the essential contribution of Meidenbauer, even if Laussedat is recognized as the author of the very first photogrammetric experiment in 1861. But if we ask who is the father of photogrammetry, in fact, ISPRS is an international family, and we must be able to recognize several fathers. When Laussedat began his career in military topography, the scientific and technical resources at his disposal with just two examples, which are the first photographic camera and the development of non-Euclidean geometries. These resources were, in fact, the result of a slow evolution process. And if we remember that the history of science and technology proceeds by long, continuous periods separated by steps with deep changes, then we can say that the former step was probably the Renaissance, with the discovery of new continents, with the use of mobile printing press to facilitate the dissemination of knowledge, with the decline of feudalism, inviting to rethink the question of land administration, with heliocentrism, with analytical geometry, and so on, as well as a very important innovation 4 centuries before Laussedat, which is the science of perspective by Alberti, Brunelleschi, Dürer, and other artists. So Laussedat was a figure of the Industrial Revolution. He believed in the civilizing role of science, but his period was mainly a consolidation of the legacy of the former centuries. And the next step with drastic changes was probably the decade of 1950-60, after the Second World War, not only with nuclear physics, but also with the first computers, the first satellites, the first laser instruments, and so on. And a good illustration of this convergence of innovations is maybe the simultaneous launch in 1957 of the first satellite Sputnik and the first analytical plotter for photogrammetry by Halounova. And this is exactly when Gottfried Konecny began his career. And I think it is a privilege to live through such a time, because so many changes make the past and the future very different worlds. You get strong basis from traditional, well-proven methods, and you are invited to contribute to the invention of new methods. It is clear that Laussedat was born too early to give the impetus for modern photogrammetry. But it would be too easy and not very honest to say that he was not supported by the French army while Meidenbauer was receiving a strong support of the imperial authorities in Germany. Because it is true, but Laussedat missed some key ideas. First, by making measurements in the images one by one, he missed stereoscopy, which appeared in Pulfrich's stereo comparator 40 years later. It is also quite strange that he did not test aerial photograph in photogrammetric applications, because he was a good friend of Nadar. He identified the main difficulty of it, which was the impossible measurements of the distance between two aerial stations. But he would have needed algebraic solutions for adjustment. But he also missed this idea, which was proved essential in the history of photogrammetry. So Laussedat was born too early, but other people were born in the right time to transform Laussedat's primitive experiments into modern photogrammetry around 1900. And this is a seed of an international community that gave birth to the International Society a few years later. Among the international references I read on the history of photogrammetry, I found some essential contribution published by Professor Gottfried Konecny that helped me to better understand the link between the pioneering work by Laussedat and Meydenbauer in the 19th century and the operational photogrammetry that became the standard method 1 century later for cartography after the Second World War. In the very last decades, photogrammetry has met some innovations like digital photography, including on a cell phone, like computer vision, like machine learning, and so on. What can we learn from history to optimize this cooperation between different technologies? For instance, we can learn to look behind appearances and to recognize that a so-called new method is only an old method which had just been improved. And this happens so many times. Professor Gottfried Konecny has published on the history, and I'm very proud to follow his example. And I really believe that our students must learn the history of the techniques they are just discovering today. It's a long evolutive process in which they will be the actors of the future steps. The lessons of our elders are essential for this, and we look forward to the next conferences and papers by Professor Gottfried Konecny. So